My name is Leanne. I am a program coordinator for NAMI Valley of the Sun, which is a part of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the affiliate local to most of the Phoenix area, Maricopa County. We invited La Frontera this year to come and help us with a presentation in honor of Suicide Awareness Month. At NAMI, we believe that it's an extremely important topic for a variety of reasons. And La Frontera is definitely one of the leading groups in Phoenix that treats and deals with suicide. So as a something to be aware of, we want everybody to know that the information provided during this presentation is not intended to provide healthcare, medical, or nutritional therapy services. We have no intent to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any physical, mental, or emotional disease or condition. Additional resources specific to your situation can be found by calling or texting 988. And then it's also important to know that 988 is a wonderful resource. If you or your loved one are experiencing a mental or medical health emergency, 911 is still an option and should still be called an emergency situation. So I wanted to start out tonight and talk a little bit of statistics. And I find that NAMI statistics specifically tend to be a little bit old. And that's fine. They just haven't updated them yet. But I did want to find something that was a little bit newer and a little bit more recent, specifically to target COVID, because I think COVID and quarantine has definitely changed some of our rates of mental health situations and crisis throughout the country and the world. So these are statistics from 2020. It's said that 45,979 people died by suicide in the United States. That's about a death every 11 minutes. We have 12.2 million adults who've seriously thought about suicide. 3.2 million adults made a plan, and 1.2 million adults have attempted suicide. To break that down, for every one person that's completed suicide, that's equivalent to 4 people that were hospitalized for suicidal attempts, 8 people who experienced an emergency department visit related to suicide, 27 folks have a self-reported suicide attempt, and 275 people who seriously considered suicide. I don't know about you, that's very sobering to me to put it in perspective like that. Also of note, you can check out the CDC website if you're interested. There was a lot of resources related to specifics of gender and different race that kind of some disparities in rates of suicide. It was very interesting to read. I just didn't feel like quite what we were doing tonight. But what I did find interesting is that firearms are used in more than 50% of the total number of suicides, followed by suffocation, poisoning, and other. So always just something interesting to note. So now, without further ado, I want to introduce Amanda Phillips. She works, like I said, with La Frontera and has graciously agreed to talk to us a little bit about her experience with suicide and how to respond to our own loved ones in the same predicament. So having said that, I am going to turn over the mic to her. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. So like Leanne said, I am the program manager for the General Mental Health and Substance Abuse Program for Tempe and Glendale. I have years of trauma training. I am an independently licensed therapist and a clinical hypnotherapist. We can go to the next slide. So one thing that I do not often talk about is my own personal experience with regard to completing suicide. So not only do I have my learned experience from going to college, I have a personal experience as well. Someone in my home completed suicide about 10 years ago. And one of the things that from that experience that it personally experienced was a lot of shame, guilt, because I was a therapist. I should have noticed what was going on. So I had to work through that. And then anger. And so those are all very common emotions when someone that we love completes suicide. So we can go to the next slide, Leanne. So what are some of the phrases that we want to pay attention to when someone that we love is having some thoughts? So they might, not very often is someone going to come right out and say, I'm having thoughts of killing myself. Most of the time what they say is, I don't see the point in living anymore. No one would even know if I wasn't here. They start pulling away. Maybe they used to go to the park, or they used to spend time with someone, and you start to notice this change or shift with them. That might be a time to start going, okay, I wonder what's going on or what's different. We can go to the next slide. Just 1 second. I'm sorry, my Alexa keeps going off. I told her to be quiet. So some things that we would ask is like, how are you doing? You want to just, so when we're talking to someone that we care about, there can be a defense that comes up. And so if we automatically just kind of jump in and start from a space of where they feel like they're being attacked or they're being accused, it's going to turn into maybe an argument or something else, and you're not going to get that goal accomplished of being able to really have that conversation with someone. And so what you can do is always just start out that conversation with, how are you doing? Is everything going okay? And organically have that conversation, and perhaps asking, are you having any thoughts of hurting yourself? And do you ever think about killing yourself? So sometimes folks feel like if I say the word kill, that's going to make somebody have that idea that they're going to go and complete suicide. So I feel like I might push them. And the truth is by saying that you're not going to cause them to go and complete suicide. So you can say, do you ever have thoughts of killing yourself? Do you have thoughts of hurting yourself? Do you feel happy? Is there anything I can do to help? So we can go to the next slide. So what do you do when someone that you love says, yeah, I am thinking about it? First, that can be a very scary answer. And what I see a lot is with family members, they actually can become afraid to say, are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? Because what if the answer is yes? Then I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do. And this is a scary space because now I have to maybe do something that I'm not even comfortable with doing. And that's very scary to me. So you want to be prepared, and I'll go over some of the numbers that you can be prepared with a little bit later. You want to and so how would I get prepared? Maybe I would know some inpatients. I would know the warm line. I would have the talk text line available to me. Then you would also want to ask them if they have a plan. Do you have a plan to kill yourself? You know how you would do that. And again, you're going to find the organic words that are natural for you to use. And that's the words that you want to use, because my words, they work for me because I can follow up on them. You use your own words so that you can follow up on them. And ask, one thing that you can ask is, have you ever tried to kill yourself? Have you ever thought of or attempted to take pills or to do something to end your life? Again, those are all very hard questions, but it is okay to ask them. And we can go to the next slide. So why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to ask someone that you love if they're thinking about killing themselves? What a lot of people think is this doesn't happen in my family. They're not really going to do it. They've talked about it before. I know they're not going to follow through with it. Or you can get some folks that feel like maybe my loved one is doing this for attention. And my answer to that is I take every time that someone says, yeah, I don't really want to be here, I don't see the point, I take that serious. If someone's bringing that up, it may not mean that today they follow through with completing suicide, but there is something that they do need help with. And just in general, there is quite a stigma around mental health in general. So, and a lot of people have, so if I'm supporting my loved one, maybe I have my own fear of suicide, maybe I have my own fear of death, maybe I don't know what to do. I think it often comes back to preparedness and readiness. We can go to the next slide. So what if someone in my wheel says, hey, I do need help? So there is a 988 suicide and crisis lifeline that you can text or call. This is nationwide. It recently went live a few months ago, and La Frontera is part of the 988 text to call line. And this is something where anyone can, a lot of times what you'll see is folks that are experiencing depression, I don't want to talk to someone on the phone, that's going to take too much energy. And so what we would do is encourage them to text them then. This way you don't have to actually talk to someone. And that's a good option. Solari, the one that's under the second one there, that is actually the one that runs the 988 number. They are a big organization that will go out on crisis calls, and they do where they dispatch out like La Frontera, Teros, and then right underneath of that, you have La Frontera Impact, and we have our crisis line number that is 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we can also provide help. And then, of course, if it's an emergency, 911 is the answer if someone has already attempted and you need help with them. Another thing that I always kind of look at is, what is your self-care? If I have someone in my life that is experiencing a lot of depression, or maybe they've experienced suicidal thoughts in the past, maybe I notice that my own comfort level is not as big as I thought it was with even talking about suicide. It's so important to know your limits, know what you are capable of doing before you get into a position where someone is saying, yeah, I do need help, and you're sitting back going, I'm not really sure what to do from this point. And then listen to yourself. And if you need to take a break, call someone that you love and say, hey, I do need a little bit of help. And if someone comes over, family members, friends, and they can also sit and help you and maybe talk through things if that's what you need to do. There are some support groups. One support group that is hosted by La Frontera at our Glendale office is called West Valley SOS Group. And it's held on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month from 6 to 8 p.m. And this, I believe Leanne is going to have a brochure that she can send out to everyone. And this is for survivors of suicide. Leanne, were you going to say something?
Oh, I just said correct. We'll be either uploading that in a minute, or I'll send it out, or probably both, to anybody that participated tonight or registered.
Okay, wonderful. And so it is a really wonderful group to be able to make some connections, and to be able to get some support. And again, that's held at our Glendale location, which will be on the brochure. And then I went through it a little bit fast. I'm always a little bit nervous when I do these presentations. So I am available if you have any questions at all. And I'm happy to try and answer them.
I want to start really quick with one question that came in with registration. And that is, if you could talk a little bit about how we would manage a juvenile or an adolescent, or even a child younger than that, who is maybe expressing suicidal ideations.
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you have a child or a youth and they are talking about suicide, as far as referencing it, I always encourage maybe reaching out and starting some therapy, because what they can experience, just like an adult, is some depression. And depression's biggest trick is to make us feel like we're alone and that nobody loves us and nobody cares about us. And so youth, they often don't have the coping skills or the resources that we do as adults to know who we can reach out to or who we can ask for help. And so it's also good to have that very candid conversation of like, hey, I have this 988 number. I know teenagers, they love to text. So the thing that I can do is say, hey, why don't we save this in your phone and have this conversation? And how often do you think about hurting yourself? And do you feel like this is a plan that you have? And really kind of having that open dialogue. What you want to do is take away the shame. Very often, people in general will feel ashamed because I'm thinking about not being here anymore, and I'm thinking about what it's like if I'm not alive. That's a wonderful question. That's a wonderful question. What you can do if someone is crying, is it, like I said, depression is going to trick people into thinking that they're alone. And so what you can do is sit with them. If they say, I don't want to talk, it's okay. We don't have to fix anything tonight. We don't have to fix anything right now. Is it okay if I just sit here with you? I won't talk to you about anything. I'm going to leave that up to you. If you want to talk to me, I'm here. But sometimes the biggest challenge that we can face in our life is to know that we don't have to say anything, and that sometimes there's no fast fix except just being here and showing you that I love you. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. Mm-hmm. And you can, it sounds like they're likely getting treatment. Mm-hmm. So you can also ask when they're not upset, if you do get upset, is it okay if I come in and sit with you? What I would do is when they are calm, I would say, is it okay when you get upset, or if you get upset again, can I come and sit with you? Is there a way that I can support you so that you know that I love you? And really come at it from giving them the power and the choice to make that decision on how they best want to be supported.
Okay. Okay.
I know as parents, we want to fix it. We want our children to be happy and we want them to be successful. And when they're hurting, we're hurting. And so one of the most difficult things we can do is to not do anything. But sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. If you feel like you're having some concern and worry, what you can do is knock on the door. You can come up with things like how they can maybe tell you with one word that they're okay and they're safe. My family uses pineapple. I don't know why that became our word. And that just means, yeah, I'm fine, but I need my space. And so they know that I'm going to be coming and checking on them. But we have that conversation when everybody's in a calm space so that you preemptively prepare.
Okay.
I would add to that if I could. Having dealt with suicide a lot in my life, not specific to me, but a loved one who very consistently would make suicidal threats. I think talking to somebody in a calm situation and at a point where they're able to process and communicate, I think is the winner in that situation. Really finding out from them. And the follow-up question can always be, if you don't want my support that way, how can I support you in that moment? Like, what is the best thing I can do in this moment to support you? Because I love you and I want to support you. The other thing that I would add, last month's community education was all about 988. Because it was brand new. It had been open and live about a month. And one of the things, and I'm about to pop that into the chat, if you want to peek at it, you can. But one of the things that was discussed is you don't have to be the one in crisis to call 988. So if your loved one, if you're worried about them, you can 100% call 988 and say, I'm worried about my daughter. I'm using your scenario. I'm worried about my daughter. This is her number. And they will actually proactively reach out to her and see if she's okay as well. So that's just another resource kind of in your back pocket to consider in that moment, because I know sometimes you're not sure, or maybe something happened where you feel like something you said or did may have tipped that off. And so sometimes it's nice to have that third party and that assurance that that third party, who I believe is a licensed social worker, having that conversation has an idea. And they're really, if you watch the video in the chat, one of the biggest things I was impressed by is how few scenarios they get and how many calls they get that are handled over the phone. People are triaged. There's not a lot of emergency, Amanda, help me what they're called. Like, there's not a lot of,
there are not a lot of crisis calls.
not
where
a lot of
you
crisis
go out,
calls and not a lot of
dispatchers.
units sent out. Most of the calls are handled directly on the phone, which is I think that's pretty spectacular.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty remarkable.
So take a peek at that video, because I think it's a really good thing to understand how that works at this point. So definitely take a peek at that. Neil, did you have a question?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the presentation. The one thing that, in my experience with my friends and family, if they're feeling suicidal, I just tell them I'm here for you. And I kind of wait and see what type of a response I get. So that's the comment I have. I'm here for you. Sometimes that is enough. And eventually they'll start talking to me about things. But I just find that to be most effective. Just something short, simple that I say to them. They know I'm there for whatever they need. And that seems to be helpful.
Oh, good point. I like that. Simple and sweet.
Leanne, I have a question, another question.
Go for it, Sherry.
Amanda, I actually lost my son to suicide in 2007. And one of the struggles that we had at the time was I had grandchildren that were fairly young. And it was, as a family, we were just trying to think of a way to discuss, the fact that their uncle was no longer there. And So is there a certain age that you would just say, no, they're just too young, or no matter what the age, is there a certain way that you would suggest that that be handled?
Yeah, that's a good question. For our youth that are very young that may not be able to process that information, we just tried to explain it in terms that they could understand. Like, we didn't use the word suicide. That he went to heaven or whatever it is, you can integrate in there. And you want to just use your best judgment when it comes to explaining what happened to the loved one that was maybe in their life frequently or infrequently, and now they're noticing that absence. And so you don't want to be like, no, I don't know what to tell them, so I'm just going to ignore it, because
Right.
that can feel like, hey, maybe there is something more. And kids are inquisitive and they're not going to stop. They're going to keep asking. And so it's best to kind of, as a family, as the adults in your family, come up with the best way to provide that information where the children are going to be able to process it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Sherry, I can add, and Amanda and I'm going rogue. So if I'm off script and you don't like what I'm saying, feel free to stop me. But I also think, one of the big pushes that NAMI makes, and Sherry, you know this from programs that you've done, is to treat mental illness like medical illness. So
Right.
I also think for specifically a really young child, I think that changing the context of it to a medical diagnosis, and again, I think that's dependent on the age, but I think that can be a really good way to communicate that to especially a young child, and also to help remove some of that stigma.
Right. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Leanne.
Yeah, thank you.
Leanne, with the young child, absolutely everything that's been said, but another caveat is to make sure that young child, infant, whatever, realizes this individual loved them, and they didn't do anything wrong. It was, they weren't bad. They weren't, you could say it better than what I'm saying, but just to assure them of the love that this person had for all of us that they leave behind, so I think that's important for them.
Absolutely. I think that's a good reminder. Thank you. I have another question.
And I hear what you're saying. And I would still suggest if the only question that you're able to ask is, how can I help you? How do you need me to help you? Make yourself available. You don't want to be in the way of, what do you want me to do? Because that's a very aggressive way of saying, I want to help you. And so really being mindful, especially if your granddaughter is a teen, the way that you speak to young adults is more, I want to give you back your power, really, to anyone. I want to give you your power. So if you would let me know how I can best support you, I will do that. And if you need more from me, I'm able to give that to you. And if you want less, I understand. But how do you feel like I can help you? And really, by saying it that way, you're putting it back on them to give them the power to really verbalize, this is what I want. And really, I always encourage kind of being mindful of the way that we ask questions, because what we may think is something that's caring could come off very aggressive, or like, I want you to tell me what you need so that I can help you. because this is uncomfortable for both of us and I want to move on. And that's not really the message that you want to convey. It's more, I accept you where you're at. Help me help you. What can I do to help you?
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Any questions?
Just as a reminder, this doesn't have to be a closed door discussion. At NAMI, we have support groups that happen every week. Neil is a support group leader, one of our wonderful folks, as is Sherry. I run a couple of support groups a month. So a lot of support there. So just remember that if you're ever in this situation, you are more than welcome to pop into a NAMI support group. And I also like to point out one of the best things, in my opinion, that's come out of COVID and pandemic life is the opportunity to virtually participate in support groups across the country. And so I can't vouch for every single support group and say they're as wonderful as the ones that we provide. But know that if you are in the moment where you need a support group faster than we can provide you one, there's always 988. You can call them. And there's also, you can do a Google search and find another NAMI and attend a support group through them, as well as the ones that Amanda talked about for the SOS. Great resource as well. And that's for, Amanda, can you just remind me, that is for individuals who have attempted suicide, or is it for family members, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It is either for those who have experienced the loss, or and mostly that is the people that we get in there is people that have experienced loss in that way. Yeah.
But definitely keep that in mind, because I think that's another really good resource. Because again, this scenario isn't something that's done when we're done with a community education night. It's clearly something that happens every day in people's lives. So keep in mind the resources that we've provided, and know that there's resources all around that can support folks.